So something pretty huge just happened. The United States, very quietly, made a decision that could change the lives of millions of people all over the world. We really need to dive into this because it's a big one. And get this, it happened without any big announcement or press conference, just poof. A major policy shift that unfolded totally behind the scenes, but its impact, well, that's going to be felt across the entire globe. I mean, we're talking about a decision that could literally alter the future for people in dozens and dozens of countries. It could change the whole landscape of global migration as we know it. And I have to stress this. This is not just another travel ban. It's something much, much deeper.
So the big questions are, what exactly did the US just stop? Who gets affected by this? And maybe most importantly, why is this so much more serious than it looks on the surface? All right, let's break it all down.
Okay, first things first, we need to be absolutely crystal clear about what we're actually talking about here. Because to really get the weight of this, you've got to understand the specific document at the heart of it all, the immigrant visa.
And let's get this straight right away. We are not talking about a tourist visa to go see the sights, or a student visa for college, or even a temporary work visa. Nope. This policy targets the official, permanent path for people who want to move to the United States for good and build a life there. You see, an immigrant visa, well, it's kind of like the golden ticket, if you will. It's the official legal pathway that gets you a green card, which means you're a permanent resident. And it's the absolute first step you have to take on the road to becoming a U.S. citizen. And here's the kicker, the really crucial point. That entire pathway, that dream that so many people have, it's just been put on pause, suspended, for people from 75 different countries. So just how big is this pause, really? Let's talk about the sheer scale and scope of this decision, because honestly, it is absolutely massive.
75. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. 75 countries. The U.S. government has suspended immigrant visa processing for citizens of 75 different nations.
And this suspension, it's set to start on January 21st. And there's no end date. They haven't given one. That one word, indefinite, that's what makes this so incredibly significant. Now, to be fair, the U.S. did clarify what is technically not affected. So things like tourist visas, student visas, and temporary work visas are, in theory, still on the table. But you heard me say technically, right? That's the key word. Because in reality, the administration has been pretty clear that even for those visas, you're now looking at much stricter screening, way longer processing times, and a much higher risk of being rejected. So in practice, getting into the U.S. is just becoming harder for everyone, across the board. And these 75 countries, they aren't all clustered in one spot. We're talking nations scattered all over the planet. Asia, Africa, Latin America, you name it. For example, while a country like India isn't on the list, a bunch of its neighbors are. Think Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. That kind of tells you this wasn't just a random selection. It feels, well, strategic. So the big question is, why? Why would the U.S. take such a massive, sweeping step right now? Let's take a look at the official reasons the government has given. Okay, so it really boils down to two main things. First, there's a concern about something called the public charge. And second, there are what they're calling gaps in national security and data sharing. So what on earth is a public charge? Well, in simple terms, it's the idea that an immigrant might become primarily dependent on the government for support, welfare. The whole concern is about preventing people from becoming a long-term financial burden on the country. And this philosophy, it really shines through here. A core idea of the administration has always been this. Immigration should be based on economic self-reliance, not humanitarian sympathy. This new suspension fits perfectly, with that worldview. But, there's another layer to this. It's not just about the money. According to U.S. authorities, a lot of these 75 countries have some pretty serious gaps in their systems. We're talking things like shaky identity verification, incomplete criminal background checks, and a big one, not sharing all their data with U.S. agencies. From their perspective, that all adds up to a major security risk. Okay, so what does this all actually mean on the ground for real people? And what's the long-term impact going to be? This is where we see how all this is building into a really fundamental shift in U.S. policy and, frankly, its place in the world. The immediate effects are, well, they're stark. Starting January 21st, if you're from one of these countries, no new immigrant visa applications will even be processed. And get this,
Even cases that were almost approved, like right at the finish line, can be stopped dead in their tracks. U.S. embassies have actually been told to hold back on giving those final approvals.
The message this sends to the rest of the world is pretty loud and clear, isn't it? It says that economic contribution and financial strength now matter more than humanitarian reasons or personal stories. And it's no surprise that many of the affected countries are already calling this out as discriminatory and politically motivated.
And look, we have to be really clear about this. This is not some minor policy tweak. It's a fundamental, foundational shift in how America views immigration. And because it's such a big deal, there's a very real chance this whole thing ends up in the courts or faces some serious pushback from Congress.
So it all comes down to this one giant question. Is this just a temporary pause, a short-term fix to deal with some specific concerns? Or are we watching the very beginning of a permanent, long-term overhaul of the entire U.S. immigration system? The answer to that question, well, it's going to decide the future for millions. And you can bet the whole world is watching very, very closely to see what happens next.